The greatest danger in times of turbulence is not the turbulence itself, but to act with yesterday's logic. This is a quote by Peter Drucker that makes me pause and think, am I approaching this challenging situation or change with the right mindset, with the right strategy, or am I using just the past strategy that worked? And is that appropriate for this specific situation? I think just that pause and rechecking, is our strategy correct or effective in this new situation, rather than assuming this will be the right strategy, can be really powerful. And today I invite you to pause with us and reflect. I will share 5 different episodes from the second season of our podcast, The Art and Science of Difficult Conversations. And you will hear 5 different scenarios. One, we'll discuss how to communicate layoffs, navigate these difficult situations and conversations with grace and heart. Well, that will be the last episode. In the first one, we'll talk about transitioning from military to civilian leadership and what are the differences and what are the lessons from that. In the second one, we'll shift to the challenges of navigating our life in today's digital world and how that impacts our communication and connections. Then we'll talk about how one of our guests turned her own layoff, getting laid off, into a gift and opportunity for something else in her life and in her career. And also with Chris, we'll discuss how to lead someone or your team when they are resisting change, especially change about adopting a new technology, which could be relevant to many leaders. And as I mentioned, we'll close with discussion about layoffs and how to communicate them with heart and grace, because these are difficult situations and difficult times. And I have a mini challenge for you. When you listen to any of the episode segments, listen for what can I learn from this for myself that can help me, my life, maybe sometime in the future when I'm dealing with the situation. Or how can this, what you're hearing, help you get more understanding and empathy for somebody else, and therefore can support you in supporting them better. And once you get that insight, write it down in your journal, make a voice note, share it with a friend. Maybe that's something that somebody needs to hear today to be supported when they are going through this difficult change. Thank you for being here, for being curious and open to learning. I appreciate you, and I will see you in the next episode. Oh, and of course, if you think, this is really challenging situation, I wish I could talk to Chris or Lucy about this, we are here for you. Our contact information is in the show notes. Reach out to us. Let's have a call and see how we can support you. Now sit back, enjoy, and I look forward to reading your insights. See you next time.
But yeah, you mentioned the military and the transition. So that's kind of the start of my journey, was joining the Marine Corps. So I made the decision in high school that I wanted to get life experience because that's what's really important. A lot of the books I was reading, the people that I was interested in, like always talked about life experience. And I was interested in becoming a writer. And what every writer tells you is before you can write, you have to do something to write about. And that just really was like, okay, how can I accelerate this process? And I was like, the military seems like that would be an interesting journey where I'm going to learn a lot and it's kind of outside of my comfort zone. So I was like, let's do that. So I enlisted right out of high school into the Marine Corps. And my job in the Marine Corps, I was in the infantry. So I was an anti-tank missile gunner. Basically just meant I got to ride around in Humvees a lot of the times. So I didn't have to do a ton of hiking, which was good. But I did that for 4 years. And that's was like my first introduction to like hierarchy and leadership and like dynamics. I'd played like high school sports, but this was kind of my first job, because that's really what it was. And I kind of grew a lot as a person and as an adult in that job, and I had a lot of learning experiences, and it was really kind of unique for me because that's what I think shaped me a ton. Um, of all the things that I've done in my life, that's kind of the biggest impact on me. So I learned a ton in there. But I made the decision, I need to get out after 4 years. I don't want to do this long term. But I was really kind of drawn to that leadership and that frontline leadership aspect. I love, but what are the steps to get there? And I got to break that down and think through how would I want to be prepared for that so I'm not thrown into it. And that was like really fun. And I was like, I kind of like this leadership thing. So I got out and I just started working. I got a job as a frontline warehouse supervisor. And I started doing schooling online. And that was kind of like the start of my career. I was like, I'm going to be in logistics. I really enjoy this. I want to work my way up, get my own warehouse. And I stayed in that field for about 3 years. And it wasn't enough leadership stuff because you got to do some, but for the most part, you were dealing with the front line, fighting fires. Hey, this order needs to go out. This delivery's messed up. You were doing a lot of problem solving, and it was a lot of fun, but it was, 50, 60% management. It wasn't that
Mm.
leadership, that like leading people, motivating, inspiring. And that's what kind of drew me to the world of leadership development and like, what if I did this internally for a company? Because that's really what I enjoy doing and that's what I'm passionate about. And that led me to my journey. West Shore Home started 4 years ago. April will be my 4 year anniversary. So I've just been doing the leadership development and kind of growing in that. Completed my education. So, I got so much out of the military. But when I think back to my development, that's where I got the most. And when I was a frontline supervisor, and just being in those frontline positions, if you're interested in leadership, there's so much value in doing that in some capacity because you learn the day to day, and it's a different experience. I'm talking to managers in my company and I'm like, I do understand what you go through. So I know when I'm telling you, oh, you can read this book and do this and that, I understand your reality and you're just, surviving, you're treading water. So it helped
Mm.
me connect a lot, and it just gave me so many benefits. So I'm kind of glad that I did that as my journey. It was a very inadvertent path. At one point, I thought I was going to be a lawyer. At another point, I
Mm.
thought I was going to be work my way up to in logistics. And then I settled on this, and this is really what I've been enjoying doing and kind of communicating and sharing those ideas. So that's kind of a quick synopsis of me, where I'm at, and what led me here.
That's awesome. And when you were in the military, what rank did you get to?
So I was a sergeant when I got out.
Okay. So for the people that are uninitiated or just don't are familiar with,
Yeah.
what does that mean in terms of how many people you are overseeing?
Yep. So I had they have different, so they have ranks, and then they have what's called a billet in the military, and that's kind of your job type position, which dictates, your span of control, how many people you have. And I held various of those. So as that rank, at one point I held it as a vehicle commander, so I had 4 people. At other times it was a section leader, so then there were 12 people, and I had kind of like 4 subordinate leaders underneath of me.
Hmm.
But the way that we worked is we had a vehicle. So as kind of the leader, you were very autonomous because sometimes you would be separated. And as you translate that to the civilian, like corporate sector, I try to tell leaders, I'm like, if you do all this prep work, you don't have the fires because your team just knows
Mm.
how to execute. Your problem is your team doesn't know how to execute. So you're putting out fires and you're dealing with this stress. But if you put in more time training and developing them, then when they go out to execute, it's muscle memory. And that's what I really learned in the military. I mean, training hours to actual hours of doing your job is just so skewed. It's easily 10 to 1
Mm.
towards training. And that's what made the difference and why it was so successful. So I definitely pulled that kind of mindset and methodology over from the military.
As a leader, what is that like, that mindset of like having so much autonomy to most civilian jobs, you don't get a ton of autonomy. There's a much more oversight into your daily activities.
Yes. That was a hard lesson I had to learn going into my first job, because what we were taught in the military is you have to make decisions, right? Bias for action. Indecisiveness is the worst thing, right? We had a saying in the
Mm.
military, it's like indecisiveness will get you killed. You can make a bad decision, that's okay, but you have to make a decision. So that mindset was like, we trust you. We're going to debrief it in an AR, an after actions review, and we're going to say, hey, why did you make that decision? And as long as you can justify, all my leaders were fine. They're like, we can correct your justification and make you think better, but you have to give us something. If you just say I don't
Mm.
know, that's a problem. So you had to have that mindset of bias for action. In my field in logistics, safety, consequences that are very serious, and risk management and risk mitigation was something that you don't learn as much in the
Mm.
military. It's there, but only at the very high levels. For us, there was no risk mitigation. It was, we have to clear this building. What's the risk? Well, we may get hurt. There is no mitigation. We're doing it. And that doesn't translate. So what the story behind the lesson was, I was a warehouse supervisor. I was 2 months in. So I am, at this point, I'm 22 years old, and I'm leading a second shift, which is compromised of, the demographic was 40 to 60-year-olds. It was mainly people that worked a second job, and I
Mm.
was leading them, which has its own bag of challenges that I had to work through. But I was autonomous because I was on second shift. So after about 5 p.m., I was the only leader in the building for the next 6 hours until third shift leader came in. So I made a lot of decisions myself. And the one time my boss decided, he's like, hey, I'm going to stick around. My general manager said, I'm going to stick around till 9 o'clock tonight. I'm going to shadow you just to give you some feedback because it's your second month here. I want to help you out. I was like, great, let's do that. So we're walking down the warehouse, and it's this receiving process. So we had trucks that came in, and they would have about 50 pallets of pasta, like penne, all different kinds of pasta. And you would unload the pallets and you'd put them in an area, and then someone else would take those and put them on a rack throughout the warehouse.
Mm.
So there are a couple of different methods for how you did that.
And he was saying it was stressing him out so much that it seems he was able to manage his stress better in the war zone than in the work, when he sees somebody and he cannot say anything and it takes forever to take action and do something. So what would you say to leaders that they see that maybe it's not about the training, it's more about the motivation or their approach? They just don't have the right attitude.
That is spot on. It's kind of what I was mentioning earlier about everyone has that training. In addition to like the training, you also have, like, you trust the other person with your life. You have to, and you build that up through the training and living together and all those situations. But there is no, is this person going to do their job? That doesn't happen. You don't really think that
Mm.
way. Is this person not giving their best effort? You never really think that because everybody is.
Yeah.
So when it comes to like motivating, it is really challenging because not everybody is making a career out of things. Like, people are worried about surviving, paying the bills, especially today. It's like, this is hard. I'm not focused on how I can grow and how I can be the best employee. I'm trying to make a living. Um, and that was really hard. I did do some things that I tried to connect them to the larger like business. So I was always big on transparency, like talking about performance openly, like the team's performance, the goals. And I tried to like take ownership. I tried to be the one that was like, hey, like, if we didn't hit our goals because the team's not motivated, I was like, look, this is my fault. So what can I do to better support you? And I tried to take like that very extreme ownership approach of,
Mhm.
hey, these are the goals. This is how the team's doing. We're not doing that great. This is how the other shifts are doing. This is what the company's targets are. This is why it matters to the company. And I was very transparent with them on those things to try and show the connection of, your work does matter to something larger. So I tried to really lean into that to like build that camaraderie of like, I am actually here to serve you and I'm your leader and I'm going to take care of you. Cause that was the whole thing in the military is very, I mean, even personal life. Like I talked to people about car loans and their finances and just like, I was my job to take care of them because they didn't know. They were 18 years old. They'd never gotten a paycheck before. They didn't even have a savings account or a debit card. And like I took them. So I wanted to show my employees that I'm here to take care of you at work and like I have your back. In return, I just need you to give your best effort. That's all I ask.
Did you find that helped that when you shifted into being that transparent and taking that ownership?
I definitely do. 100%. People just saw me out on the floor and they seemed like genuinely happy to interact with me. Like when I would go up and ask them how they're doing, how their kids are, if I knew what was going on in their life, they just seemed genuinely happy in those interactions. So I don't remember or know if performance improved, but to me, like that anecdotal evidence, if you're happier at work, that's a win. If the numbers stay the same, but you're happier, like that is a huge win to me. So I would say so.
It sounds like that you show that building the trust, you open the door first in a way, saying, I have your back. You can trust me.
Yep, that you have to as a leader. You just gotta give it
Just
to them.
start, yeah.
Yep, that's the burden of leadership.
Yeah. You were talking about how like when you are in the military, like, everybody's doing what they got to do. Everybody's gonna do what they do, and like, what were some of the growing pains when you started realizing when you were in the civilian world, like that's not everybody else's mindset, and that's not everybody going to respond to the same communication style?
Yeah, that was really that was a hard lesson I probably learned in my current role. Just transitioning to being kind of like an internal consultant. I expected some subject matter experts to just deliver on the deadlines.
I would say the number one struggle that I see people have right now is, or just in general, is relationships. And primarily their intimate relationship. I can tell you for men in particular, and we work with a lot of women too, 8 out of 10 men are struggling in their relationship. And that is causing them a lot of pain and anguish. And this is the same applies to women too, I think, is because they want to connect. They want to be with that person, whether it's a communication error or a challenge or something else. There is some kind of barrier there in the relationship where they are lacking that satisfaction and fulfillment. That's one thing I see very, very common amongst the vast majority of people. And we've worked and done studies with a lot of people. The other one right now that we are seeing in the personal effectiveness space or just in general is a collective low level of energy. We are seeing that in a significant amount, and especially in the workforce as well. People's relationship levels. So you can measure this because communication is two things. It's a form of transfer of energy and information. That's what communication is effectively, right? It's a transfer of, hey, it's an influence. This is the information I'm sharing, but it's also an energy share as well. So, and why people say, what do you mean it's an energy share? Well, every form of communication with words or body language or whatever that is comes into one of our senses, one of our 5 senses. You're not necessarily licking people, so that's not one of the senses that it comes in. But it gets
hopefully not.
Yeah, well, maybe if you're a kid. My son, he's 11. He still does that every once in a while to annoy me. So,
oh boy.
Yeah. So I would say that still applies for him. That's still applicable. So those senses, we take that information and convert it into energy. So it is absolutely energy. There are electrons that come into our brain that we use to figure things out. So that's what communication is. And coming back to this low level of energy, this is what we're seeing is people through COVID have come out very obviously socially isolated, because one of the other core aspects, you would know this, Chris, and sorry, Lucy, I don't know your background, but we are social beings, and our brain, to be healthy and remain healthy, needs to remain social. In fact, it's one of the key things that can help us not necessarily improve our IQ, but keep our intelligence or slow us down from aging, is social interactions. So this has dropped in terms of energy. People at the workforce are not as engaged anymore. They are not driven anymore. And this is a general blanket statement. This is not everybody. But we are seeing a high level. In 2023, we did a survey, research survey, In Canada, with a large population size, and we identified that 83% acknowledged or said that they were either burnt out or have been burnt out in the last 12 months.
Mm.
So what is this doing to the workforce from a productivity perspective? It's like at an all-time low. And what does that also do from relationships and communication? Well, guess what? When you're low energy, you don't communicate very effectively.
Mhm.
And that's the biggest challenge that we're seeing within relationships right now, too. So we have relationship challenges, we have low level of energy in terms of productivity, motivation, and drive. And then we're seeing the impact of a lack of effective communication. Again, not only have an impact on relationships, but personal well being as well. And stress, burnout, depression, anxiety. We've seen those numbers go up. And it's not just COVID, it's because of technology as well. Firm believer, we've been watching this for the last 10 years. We haven't done direct studies on it, but our partners have, that our now digital era is one of the causes of poor communication amongst individuals and within relationships.
So I'm hearing two big challenges with the relationships: how to connect, how to have the effective communication, and also the low level of energy. What would you say? What can we do with that? How
Oh.
to increase? What would be some of the tips?
Yeah,
No,
that's
it's
that's an interesting one. It's so first of all, it's very personal to the individual. But we do this as part of our training. This is part of our advisory. In fact, my wife is a functional medicine expert that has an expertise in health performance. So this is what we do when we work with our clients, because she works on the health side and I work on the cognitive and emotional side and spiritual side.
nice.
So we kind of try to hit all four areas, because energy comes into one of four categories. The thing I think, coming back to the question that you asked, Lucy, was the communication part, which is, I think it's so important for an individual to be in tune with themselves. And many of us have lost that being in tune, or just lost ourselves, or we've never perhaps been even really in touch with ourselves. And that part is so important, because when we're authentic and aligned more with ourselves, then we can have more effective communication. And that fundamentally comes down to it. And I think that's important. If I share like a real life stories, when I'm in line with myself, other people around me, I don't even have to really say much. They just get me, because I'm behaving in a way that's in alignment with myself. And I like it. And hopefully those people around me in my friendships, they would probably like it because they're hanging out with me. They're my friends. So we're automatically more aligned from that perspective. So it's not always verbal communication, it's also body language and our own behavior. Do I feel like I'm acting within myself, in alignment with myself? If I'm not, then that whatever communication I put out is either going to be not authentic, or it's going to be misaligned. I think that's the first part. And coming back to something I said before, which was, all forms of communication they have two aspects. One is information, the other one is energy. So we really have to be aware of what kind of energy we are transferring to other people, also absorbing from other people, but also the information that's involved. Because if we get better at communicating, we're going to get better at transferring information and better at transferring energy. And that's ultimately what good relationships are about in terms of interactions and communication. And why do we communicate? Every form of communication is a way of some kind of influence. It's sharing. Hey, even if you don't want someone to do something, it's, I'm okay. We're in each other's presence. Or, for a baby, they cry because they're hungry. Even if I look over at my son while he's doing something, I kind of give him the eye. It's because I'm saying, chill out, son, or whatever it might be, my daughter. Everything is a form of influence. Every communication is some kind of form of influence. So I think if we get better at understanding it, which I think why your podcast is so great, for people to learn that is such a masterful skill that just improves quality of life and relationships and happiness and ultimately fulfillment. And we're all here, as one of my mentors, spiritual mentors, once said, every day we should be living it like we're in Disneyland, because that's what life is like.
I worked in corporate radio for about 11 years and was laid off January 20th, 2009. And to say that I was shocked is an understatement. I didn't see it coming. There were now I will. This is going to sound counterintuitive, but on the front page of the Wall Street Journal in November of 2008, there was an article written that said when Bain Capital came and bought Clear Channel that there were going to be 30,000 layoffs. But of course, in my hubris and arrogance of being a great salesperson at that point, I didn't think it was going to be me. And it was. Ironically, 2 years after I got laid off, I wrote my boss who laid me off a thank you note, because what I thought was the worst day ended up being the best day because it launched me into this vocation of coaching. And this is what I was called to do. And fortunately, 4 months after I started, I secured my first client. So, and it's just been gangbusters since then. And, moving the business when we moved from Virginia, because my husband was in the military 20 years and he retired. We moved from Norfolk to Philadelphia, and at first I was like, I'll go back and get a job. And then I realized, yeah, no, don't want to do that. And the universe, or whatever your belief system, kept sending me clients. So I would go on a job interview and I'd open my inbox when I came back and there would be 3 people inquiring about my services. So I took that as a hint that I should keep doing this. And now here we are 16 years later, hundreds of clients, over 10,000 hours of work. And I get to be around amazing people like you too, who are dedicated to transforming the world so that it's a better place for whoever comes after us.
And so I think it's impressive, especially like that experience of getting laid off, with like that. What was that experience like to live through that culture of this impending layoffs that were kind of in the atmosphere?
The October of 2008, we got word that we were being bought by Bain Capital. Now, I had been through mergers and acquisitions with my clients. I had never experienced it working within an organization. So one of the things I would tell my interns that worked with me at radio was make friends with the engineers, because they can make your life easy or a living hell. The engineers were great friends of mine. So I remember walking into their offices and saying, y'all have done this before. Like, what should I expect? And they looked at me without missing a beat and said, get an external hard drive and start saving your work on it. And I went, wait, what? And they were like, no. We don't know anything. But if you want to protect yourself, do that. Right. And I also consulted with a labor attorney just to find out what my rights were. I didn't have any intention. I just wanted to know, in the Commonwealth of Virginia, where it's a right to work state, what do I have a right to? I was like their top salesperson at that point. I recovered like $670,000 in lost revenue from angry clients. I created I think $1.8 million in new revenue in 2008, which I don't know if you two are weren't young to remember this, but nobody was spending money on anything. The housing bubble had just burst and all of that. So I remember sending out an email to my clients who were like BMW North America, McDonald's, Dollar Tree stores, Spirit Cruise, all of that. So they were marquee clients. Saying, pray for my colleagues across the country. It's a very uncertain time. We don't know what's going to happen. Okay. So fast forward to January 20th, 2009, historic inauguration, right? Aretha's got the hat.
You as a manager and leader, you're trying to get your employee on board with the technology change, and they are just pushing back. They're fighting back. They don't want to do it. Whether or not they had good performance before, it doesn't really matter, but they're pushing back now. They're refusing to use the new system. They don't want to learn the new system. Maybe they're your top performer. So you just can't eat. It's not as easy as I'm just going to let go of this employee because they're your top performer. You kind of need them. They've been there a long time. They got all the institutional knowledge. They're a good role model to everybody else on the team, except for this one thing.
Except for that one thing.
Except for that one thing. So I guess, Lucy, what do you think when you're thinking about this, when you're thinking about an employee that's struggling to get on board with the change? And this could be part of lots of other things, but I think it's unique when it comes to technology because the pace of it moves so fast compared to other types of changes. So what are your thoughts? What are your best practices in terms of how you can how a manager or leader can help talk to their employee about this stuff?
I would say there are two different situations. One in a smaller company where the leader, the manager actually can get their buy-in before launching that change. So they could co-create and check in with them. This is and get their buy-in by explaining the benefits, really having empathy, listening to their concerns, fears, and seeing if they can address it and how they could move forward. If they get a buy-in, the accepting of the change, it might be still difficult and there would be hiccups, but it would be way easier. But let's say it's a large corporation, somebody on the top made a decision and the manager just needs to announce it. This has been done, and they didn't have a say in the process of that. So what would be the first steps? I would say, again, listening, being open, not pushing the change forward, but being open and listening. What are the concerns? What is the challenge? Is that maybe a lack of training? Or the training is not easy to understand and therefore they are being challenged? Or is that more because they are afraid that the technology will replace their job? And so there is a different resistance, right, with the AI. Now, a lot of people are worried that if they basically learn to use that soon, it's going to replace them and their job.
Yeah.
So that's a little different resistance. So now really understanding where the employee is coming from, what is the true challenge, and then seeing how to address those concerns. And also, again, trying to get a buy-in, communicate the benefits. Not just for the company, but also for the employee. Would that help streamline the process and therefore save, let's say, their admin time, which most of us don't like as much. So they could focus on the things that they actually like. And also clear communication about expectations, I would say. Maybe some timelines, what needs to happen, and keep the feedback loop open and set up maybe some check-ins, regular check-ins to see how they're doing. What's coming up for you? What would you say are some key things? Anything that
I love all
mentioned?
those tips. I think I agree with all of them. I'm actually wondering as you're talking, I think it'd be helpful for us to talk through, because I think there are lots of reasons why somebody might be resistant to technology or a new technology change. And yes, one of them could just be they just don't like change in general. They're afraid of it. But I think there's always deeper reasons, as you hinted at.
Yep.
They might be afraid of it taking over their job, right?
Yep.
In AI or and I think that's the important reality, is that yes, for some jobs, technology will take it over. And I think it's important to acknowledge, and there's no way a manager could ever know 10 years into the future, 15 years, what's going to happen.
True. Yep.
So it's just like I always advise managers not to promise a promotion or a raise in the future. So this is just adding more work on for us for a little bit.
You made me think of two different things. One, the cultural differences. Nowadays, with some global organizations, there could be working together with a manager, let's say, in different country. I have clients in Europe that are working with, colleagues in India, let's say, and there's some culture differences, and how to navigate those. When they say, yes, I understand, but maybe they're saying that because they don't want to lose the face, and how to navigate these. So yes, we will accept the change, yet nothing is happening. So there also might be opportunity for noticing whenever we get triggered. What is it that's triggering us? And then having those difficult conversations, could be accountability conversation at that point, or really understanding. So what's happening? You were saying you understand. And so a lot of clients have actually also this challenge around the culture and navigated those. And the other point that you're making about really the emotional regulation and noticing our own triggers, when they can be coming from, and noticing different personality styles, that all of us are different, that the other, and appreciating both our and respecting our process, and that somebody else might have completely different process. Doesn't mean one is better or another one. And especially for leaders, if they are very driven, focus on the task, getting things done, sometimes what can happen, they forget about the emotions. And there are people that are more focused, yes, getting things done, but also the relationships matter.
Mm.
And the emotions, let's get it done in a way that feels good for everybody. And if the manager is the type that's really focused just on the tasks and misses the emotional part of the change, that might not work really well. And people will push back. They'll feel disempowered. They could even quit in some extreme cases.
Mm.
So really noticing and being aware of also not just our emotions, but also the other people's
Yeah.
perspectives and emotions.
I'd love to get your thoughts on this. I work with a lot of managers that are also the opposite of that. They care too much about the emotions, and they often then let the expectations slide, or they care so much about making sure the other person's comfortable and cared for and being empathic that they often forget that they also need to hold people to a standard. How would you advise people balance that?
That's a great question. Yes. So that comes back to that self-awareness. What is my strength? And when my strength is sometimes turned too far, when it's at the extreme, that could be something that sabotages not only the working relationship, but as well the performance. And knowing what is the boundary that I need to also set for myself and have the difficult conversation. So maybe those managers, they might be afraid or not willing to have the difficult conversation and give them the feedback that they are not meeting the expectations. And noticing that, and rather than avoiding the conversation, really diving into that and noticing, yes, I don't want to hurt somebody else's feelings, but this is part of the job, and bringing it back to this is, I know validating this is difficult for both of us. This is just a difficult process the company is going through right now. And at the same time, we need to get this done and really focusing what are the next steps so that we hit our goal, our timeline. And being mindful of not slipping into, okay, I don't want to hurt their feelings. So I cannot give them the feedback really the way I want to, but really being self-managing and preparing for that difficult conversation that we always talk about, and really bringing what is the, and focus more on the tasks, on getting this done, and what are the steps we need to move it forward. What would you say? Anything else that you would add there?
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it's being more thoughtful about the process, and also, there's a great chart in restorative justice and restorative practices. There's a great chart that shows it's a 2x2 grid about, like, and one axis is accountability or support, I should say, and one axis is the expectation or standard. And the ideal is you're supposed to hold people to high expectations and give them the right support to get to that. So it's not that you're holding them accountable without you're holding them to a standard without giving them the support they need to get there, or vice versa, right? Both are not helpful.
I love that
It's about,
perspective.
what is the standard? The standard is we have to do this. And let's talk about what you need. Kind of what you were talking about earlier is understanding the person, understanding what do they need, why are they pushing back? And they may not even know right away. If they haven't done a lot of self-discovery or discussion, they may not know why they're pushing back. They feel that internal urge to push back and say, no, I don't like this. So as a manager, you're not the therapist. It's helpful though to talk through with your person and kind of dig deep, like, what's driving this? And what that could tell you what they need. Do they need time to work on this on themselves?
It's the idea that when you're having a difficult conversation about job eliminations or really anything, is there's always the objective of, there's a message I need to share. But what really matters is, does this person know they're a valued human? Do they know I care? That has to be the end game. And I focus on helping people, businesses specifically, navigate change without leaving people behind. So everything I do is people-centered. It's based on what people need to be at their best in work and life. And I'm an educator at heart. So I teach at a couple universities when I'm not running my business. And then I'm a mom to 7 kids. So we're a blended family. So my husband is Jason. We have 3 adult kids and 4 kids at home. So that's me in a nutshell.
Awesome. And are you just perpetually tired all the time with 7 kids?
Well, they've never all lived in the same house at the same time. So that helps
Okay.
to kind of space it out. But I think I was when I was in my corporate role, because I think sometimes you can be doing work that just takes a lot out of you, where you feel like you don't have anything left to give at home. And I'm in a different space now. And I think some of that is it comes with not identifying yourself so closely with your job and how productive you are and those types of things. So now when I work, I'm doing things that are life-giving, kind of breathing life into me, energizing, so that when I am with my family, I have something to give. And so I'm less tired now, even though I might work more, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When we talk about this conversation, I think one of the reasons we connected, or we love each other's work, is because we're focused on not just the corporate stuff and the HR stuff, but how do we deal with people? How do we move people along and connect and value our most important resource, which is the humans, which is the people that work in our organizations.
But I have been a part of making those decisions, thinking through how a company might tackle some of those challenges, how it's communicated. And I have really good and really bad experiences with all of that. So that's hopefully things we can dive into, because I think it's good for people to see kind of some of the different angles and understand what goes into it.
Yeah. I can't wait to dive in, because I want to dive into all of that. How do you even think about it? How do you conceptualize who to lay off and the structure, all that, but also how do you get into it when you're the messenger, right? Because I think a lot of people who have to deliver the message didn't make that decision either. They just were told, like, eliminate these few people or this group of people. And but yeah, I can't wait to just dive into it. So let's talk about this. When you think about layoff conversations, why are they so, what makes this hard conversation to have and hold in the first place?
I think it's right back to the point that you just said. Most times the people communicating it did not make the decision. So right there, there's already tension, and there's a lot of heaviness to the conversation. And one of the things that people may not always realize is when you're the person communicating, there's a job elimination, there's a reduction in force. Usually a decision's been made. You're the messenger of that decision. And you usually don't have freedom to say what you want to say. And people don't always realize that. But when things are happening and maybe there's a need to, it could be we're eliminating jobs because we have to achieve cost savings for a reason, right? There's some business reason that's driving this. The company is trying to do their best to make a business decision and to not make it personal, because then it's more fair, right? Kind of removing bias, basing it off of objective factors. But part of that is also being really objective in the language. Kind of, why did this happen? What's next? And so that's why it sometimes will feel scripted to people if they're on the receiving end. Kind of, these are the facts. This is what's happened. Here's what you can expect next. That also can feel cold, right? It can feel uncaring. It can feel like you've worked with me all these years and all you're going to give me is like something you're reading off a script. Right. But a lot of times the messenger they aren't free to say what they want. They can't insert maybe the empathy and compassion that their heart wants to, because they have a role to play as a leader of that company at representing that message, and it's provided to them. And that can be super hard on the receiving end because you don't have all that context. You just know, hey, Chris, you've been my boss for 10 years. And now you're telling me this like you don't even know me. And that's hard for the person receiving it, for sure, because it feels out of nowhere and it conflicts with the relationship you have with that person. It doesn't make sense. And it doesn't make emotional or rational sense in that moment. But if you're the person giving the message, it can be heartbreaking to say, gosh, I've worked with Lucy for 10 years. I want her to know how valued she is and how important as a human being right now. And I don't feel like I can convey that. So there's a lot packed into that. But I would say one thing I would want people to know is that you often just don't have all the context. as the person giving the message or the person receiving, because a lot of times we're kind of in this messy middle of the company. We're not in the driver's seat.
But like, how can we, I think we'll go explore other things too, but I think while we're on it, how would we better trust people and be more transparent and balance that risk? Because I think it's fair to balance risk, but how do we be more human in that approach?
I think it's one of those that there's not the way to do it that's right and everyone else is wrong. It's so nuanced, but I would say it has to do a lot with the culture of the company to begin with, which we can't fix all of those cultures that are not healthy. But I would say usually when there is a job elimination, reduction in force, or whatever terminology is used, there's a business reason for it. And I think sometimes we're a little bit too protective of that business reason, what's behind this. But we're dealing with grownups, people who can understand complex things if you just bring them along. And so sometimes I think employees, maybe they can't know all the things that are happening behind the curtain, but they can know we need to grow or we have certain targets. And to meet those targets, these are the things that need to happen in our company. And if those things aren't happening, then we probably have to make adjustments. Well, how could we do that? Here are the levers that we can pull, right? I think it's okay to be transparent about this is how we make money. This is how we stay in business. This is how we stay competitive so that people understand what part they play in all of that. I think that's a first step. It's more empowering for people to know how can I influence growth and success. But that also helps people to better understand when we're not successful or we're not growing or we face some kind of headwind, what are maybe some of the things we're going to have to do or look at or consider. So some of it is just treating people like grownups and helping them understand this is what it takes to run a successful business and here are the things that we can consider. That's part of it. But I think that when you have those messages, when you have to say the hard things or let people know, here are some of the potential realities, it's understanding that there's certain things that people need to be at their best. So we want people to feel trusted and involved and to feel like they have some autonomy. So along the way, before you ever get to the point of job elimination, you can build in some of the conditions for people to be at their best, to be more involved and more part of the conversation. All the things you're reading off a sheet of paper, right?
Yeah.
So it makes sense sometimes when you say, well, this reaction seemed out of hand, or this seemed like an overreaction. We just have to remember people are in self-protective mode, right? They're just trying to manage the threat in front of them in the best way they can. And it does feel like a threat, even if it's said kindly. It still is scary, right? To have something like that said, like all of a sudden my livelihood is in jeopardy.
Right.
It's a scary place to be. And I think sometimes we think we can just kind of logic people into being okay with things where I don't know if you've read, there's a book I like a lot. It's called Switch, How to Change Things When Change is Hard by Chip and Dan Heath. Have you guys?
That's on my list of things to read.
I just started reading it.
It's a good one. I want to say it's not a new book, but it's one I keep coming back to. It's talking about, I'll break it down very simply. It's the idea that we have kind of the need to intellectually understand something. So the head and the heart, right? And we often are just speaking to the head. And they use the analogy of an elephant and a rider. So an elephant and a rider sitting on top of the elephant. And the rider is who you direct. This is where we're going. This is what it looks like. Kind of here's the vision. And the elephant is more of the emotions and motivation. And even if you tell the person, here's where we're going, here's the direction, the emotions, the elephant is stronger than the rider, right? And so if you can't move emotionally, if you don't feel motivated and confident to take steps forward, you can be stuck. And so but the way we orchestrate change in businesses is to speak to the rider. It's the intellectual understanding. And we don't think about how important it is for a person, a human being, to feel confident taking steps forward. And that's not just about job eliminations, layoffs, and all of that. I think that it's one of the things I try to help influence when I'm working with a client who's facing something like this is how the idea of how do you uphold the dignity of humans through this process as best you can? Because we know it's still a business. It's not a family, it's a business. So we have to think through, okay, what's the business decision and what's the best way to care for people while we are still meeting business needs? And sometimes there are things that you can do. Let's say for a scenario that job elimination is inevitable. Positions have to be cut. The decision's been made. These are the people that will be impacted. You can still think through, how do we set them up for success? Are there things we can do to help them bridge this transition well? Can we give them some time to transition out well so that they can connect with people that are important to them, so they can wrap up work in a way that they feel proud of, so that they have the support they need to move to the next step and so forth.
Mm.
And too often companies will cut their losses quickly. They'll just say, and today's your last day, because
Mm.
that feels cleaner sometimes
Yeah.
to the company. But it doesn't have to be that way. I would say there are circumstances where maybe there's a security risk, or maybe it's a sales position and there's a concern about somebody maybe taking clients from one place to the next. There's reasons why you might want to cut ties immediately, but often you don't need to. You can transition well so that people know I'm valuable as a human being, as a contributor. This wasn't personal. And so my company is doing what they can to make this be as positive a process as it can be.
Mm.
You can orchestrate it that way. It takes more time and intention, but it's so worthwhile when you think about the people that are impacted, not just the people that are losing a job, but the people around them.
When I got laid off, I was given, it was like the beginning of the month. They gave me to the end of the month.
I think that's a good decision for people to have, or for people to say, I'm willing to put in the work and get that retention bonus.
Yeah.
It is good if you can create options for people, because we do, as humans, we do like to have choices, even small ones. It does, maybe you wouldn't have chosen to have your job eliminated, but if you can choose something about how you exit so that you can care for yourself and your family if you have one at home, right? Those types of things, it's great to feel like you're in the driver's seat. And I think we need that in some respects, even in the tiny ways that might not be significant to a business. Just being able to choose. I know sometimes we would say, we would love to have you stay on for the month. How do you feel about that time frame? And so I've had people come back and say, I'd really like, now that we know, I just want to transition my work well. And then when I'm done with that, could I exit? They didn't want the month, but it gave them a choice, right? Because I could give flexibility there. It wasn't like they needed to leave immediately. I wanted them to leave on terms that were good for them. And that's much more empowering than me saying, and you have to be here through this day at 5 p.m.
Yeah.
Right. Well, especially because if you've transitioned off all your work, at some point you're just sitting there not doing anything.
That's what they end up doing, because they don't want to put anything new on their calendar, and they don't want to take on anything new. And then eventually the days get really light and they're just kind of hanging out, and they're like, I think I'm ready, but they need to write it out to a certain day and time. So if you can give them some choice there, say, yes, take the time you need to transition, then let me know, when you feel like you're ready and everything is moved to the other people's plates and you feel like you're in a good place. That can be a really meaningful thing for someone. I think that sometimes we're afraid of giving people too many choices at that stage, but I've seen people with companies for 25 to 30 years that are cut off and told, today's your last day.